companies nowadays think that making sequels is the gateway to success. And some don't know when to make a sequel and drop their current game. There are many sequels that were better than the originals, but on the other hand, there were those which completely flopped. The thing is, sequels can make or break a franchise and its brand. I'm talking about having fans that squeal from joy when they see a new game, or people absolutely tweaking out on Twitter about how bad the game is. And the money? We are talking in the freaking billions. Sometimes playing safe can literally be the riskiest move. Have you seen those games which keep shitting out new sequels which barely have any difference even when the player base is on their knees begging for something new? It's like they're stuck in a loop, throwing out familiar titles instead of fresh ideas. But why is that? Let's take a peek behind the curtain of game development. When you are a big studio and you make a banger game which popped off, you usually want to make a franchise or a brand out of it and put out sequels. You see, making sequels is the comfort food of the gaming world. And that's because they are already familiar with the game, it already has a fan base, and you can reuse a lot of stuff for the development of the second game. That saves a ton of time, effort, and cost for the studio, and it is quote-unquote safe. But that's the tricky part. The safe approach we're talking about may just not be safe after all. There is something called franchise fatigue. It happens when players get tired of seeing the same game with a new coat of paint. This is what also happened with Disney Infinity and its Toys to Life genre. If you want to see the video on that, I've covered that in depth on this channel. The problem isn't even just sequels. It's about having high expectations each time a new sequel drops. People expect it's going to be bigger, better, and more mind-blowing than the last. But when you keep dropping sequels, the bar is set way too high for you to go over. We can see that with COD and its new Omni movement. They finally crossed their bar after ages of dog water games, and it's finally something fresh and new that fans are genuinely enjoying. So what happens when you're relying on sequels to be the safety net? A lot of sequels end up playing it super safe and stick to the formula. Add a new character or two, slap on some better graphics and call it a day, which might just be why it fails. There are so many examples to look at where studios were stuck between making something too similar and players getting bored or changing way too much, which might just lose what made the original great. Those games are the... Remember Borderlands 3? The game which was supposed to be the next big thing but ended up feeling more like an expansion pack. I remember my friend group was overhyping the game for ages just to be disappointed. The story is okay at best, but it's just held back from a pair of bad villains who you don't want to kill as much as you want them to shut up. Then there's Overwatch 2, which literally wasn't Overwatch 2 but rather Overwatch 1 relaunched with a UI update. It was more like Blizzard just wanted to milk their cash cow than anything else. The whole time before launching the game, they advertised a PvE mode which was their unique selling point of the game, which they didn't even include when the game was launched. Also, let's not pretend why all the skins are as expensive as they are, and let's not forget the fact that the Battle Pass doesn't even pay for itself. Oh, and the bugs aren't being fixed and the players aren't being heard. And the same train was followed by CSGO. CS2's announcement was groundbreaking. It left people's timbers shivering. People were thinking, is it finally going to end Valorant's run? Nah, it was just a shit show with minor updates. It could have literally been just a big update to CSGO. Hackers are still rampant, and the only reason it's still alive is because OnlyPixel is opening cases.
Nice, Madrina!
Hey, I just want to take a quick second from you guys just to say that, like I'm not even joking, 99% of you guys are not subscribed to me. Please subscribe, like or comment so I can keep making these type of videos and I can feed the kids in the basement. Thank you. Another big sequel that absolutely missed the mark was Duke Nukem Forever. They took 15 years to develop a game and on launch, everyone was disappointed. A Screen Rant article said critics commonly remarked that the game was juvenile in a distasteful manner. The game featured gratuitous nudity, constant swearing, fecal humor, and rampant misogyny. For many, this was too far to go for a game in 2011, and was the primary problem many had with Duke Nukem Forever. In the end, it feels as the Duke Nukem Forever's primary crime was taking too long to release. When the first game came out, this type of humor was much less frowned upon in pop culture than it has become in recent years. Sometimes some games are just not made according to the current trends and fashions and end up failing. On the other hand, there are games which rush the development. You can't expect to cook a 5-star meal in 5 minutes. You can't make a new banger by just cutting corners. I know people complain when the game's release date is pushed even further, but it's better we get a full cooked meal than a raw one.
The boss is raw!
Devil May Cry 2 failed for that exact reason. After Devil May Cry 1's success, they rushed into development of 2. The sequel was a lesser game in every aspect, from the combat to the enemies to the level design. Even the bosses aren't that good either. And there was Dragon Age 2, which also followed a similar path as they brought in massive changes to the combat system, a way more confined and reused environment, little character loot or inventory, and a utilization of one central character. In Origins, all of those things were way more expanded simply because the first game had over 5 years of development while 2 was rushed out in less than 2 years. I mean, look at Cyberpunk. Even though they took their sweet time and delayed the game multiple times, they got pretty negative feedback on launch. But the game is now 20 times better than it was before. It's almost like half the gaming studios throwing out half-baked games to milk for money and keep giving them updates when those updates should have been there in the first place to make the game whole. Ubisoft is killing it by just doing that recently with their Star Wars game. But this problem largely stems from the fact that investors for these very games rush the game's development as they're typically looking for a quick return on their investment. Delays for them can mean lost revenue opportunities, especially in competitive markets. Apart from rushing games, on the other hand, there are those which fail to introduce new things or innovate the game, like Mass Effect Andromeda. The game was stale and boring. The game itself was made by a new team at BioWare, which led to inconsistencies in quality, and just upon the release of the game there were numerous technical issues and bugs. Moreover, there was no urgency or distress from the story. Andromeda was more known for its facial animations, and it's the same path followed by the Just Cause franchise. Just Cause 2 and 3 were one of the most famous games of its time, innovative and fun, while Just Cause 4 was repetitive and uninspired. It had a crazy amount of technical issues and bugs and had a weak narrative. There was a lack of improvements from its predecessor, and it could not pass the expectations that were set on them. There is also one of the most recent sequel failures, which was very close to my heart, Payday 3. This was supposed to be 2023's biggest hits in gaming, one of the best games to experience heist. I absolutely adored Payday 2 and its DLCs, but Payday 3 was a heist for my wallet's money instead. They started off with the most horrific start possible with wonky servers and bad matchmaking. And as players finally got to play the game, it was almost obvious there was a lack of content, and one of the most annoying things were voice chat and text chat not showing up either. I don't understand how they put out Payday 3 with the amount of content it had to compete with Payday 2, which had almost a decade worth of extra DLCs. It was obvious people would prefer a game that was more optimized with more content over a newer game starting all over again with just the graphics and a UI update. As of now, on Steam charts, Payday 2 has more current players than Payday 3. Just goes to show how bad of a sequel it was. You see, I can keep talking about why sequels like Tony Hawk Pro or Resident Evil 6 failed, but at the end of the day, we have to remember that game companies are not perfect, and when you're trying to fix what already works, you can end up with a mess. The real question we should be asking is, what really makes a great sequel? Does it raise a thin line between innovating and alienating? This is the innovation tightrope, and it's a pain in the ass to balance on. Game devs are constantly trying to figure out how much new stuff they can cram into a sequel without pissing off their fan base. That's what happened with Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3, where the game felt like it copy-pasted maps from Modern Warfare 2 and called it a day. And the campaign was literally 2 to 3 hours long. That's like a glorified tutorial at best. So what's really the secret sauce? How do you make a sequel not suck? Let's take Mass Effect 2 for example. The game didn't just continue the story, it took everything the fans loved about the first game and made it better. They improved the graphics, improved the gameplay mechanics, and it built on the choices you made in the first game. But it's not just about making things prettier or adding more explosions. Successful sequels understand the core of what made the original great. Look at The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. It took the exploration and adventure that Zelda fans loved and said, what if we made that bigger? The result was a massive open world and lets you tackle challenges however you want. The common denominator in the examples is that sequels aren't supposed to be afraid of innovation. Taking risks, trying new things, but always keeping the spirit of the original intact. Secondly, they listen to their fans. All the little annoyances of the previous titles, they fix that shit in the sequels. Making sequels is all about balance and keeping to its roots, but there are other factors which also affect the probability of success of a sequel.
You're watching the most exciting game you will ever see on your TV set. Telstar by Coleco with 3 different games.
Well, it's about finding the sweet spot. You want enough old stuff to make fans feel at home, but enough new stuff at the same time to keep things interesting. Successful sequels often tap into this by bringing back characters we love or revisiting locations that made us go wow in the first place when we experienced it. A game series that absolutely mastered this was Assassin's Creed. When I played the first ever AC game as a kid, and in the starting scene where you take your first ever leap of faith, it was when I first fell in love with the game and its environment. And every time we got a new AC sequel, the exact leap of faith held so much nostalgia and power to it. Every time you take the leap, you get sent back to the first time you ever did it. AC had some great sequels, but now it's taking a step far from what made it AC. Personally, the AC sequels died for me after Desmond died. And that's the thing though, some companies think that they can just slap a coat of nostalgia paint on a turd and call it a day. Newsflash, we ain't freaking stupid. Over-reliance on nostalgia can lead to games that feel stale. I mean, just look at the new AC coming out, it feels like a Ghost of Tsushima ripoff. Another franchise which mastered the art of nostalgia was the Pokemon franchise. If you play any game with Pokemon and you grew up in the peak era of that franchise, you already know you're going to go down a trip to memory lane. Its world, the environment, and the characters are so iconic and carry such strong nostalgia with it that you're bound to fall in love once again. Nostalgia in such cases also plays on a psychological aspect. An article by The Guardian suggested that in their research they found that people who have social nostalgia memories, they feel connected to themselves and their friends in the past, and they also feel connected in the present. Being able to enter the environment and the world where you left off, tap back into the memories you first made, is the nostalgia factor that makes a great sequel. An important part of a game is the hook of the game. Just like I hooked you onto this video, the first 15 minutes of playing a game is one of the most important 15 minutes. But why is the intro so damn important? It's the same reason first impressions matter in the real world. If it doesn't go well, you're probably not keen on seeing that person again. Let's take a look at the sequels that nailed the hooks. There was God of War 2. This game started off with a bang. I swear I'm not at Unk level yet, but the game was peak. You get stripped of your powers right off the bat, and that's a crazy hook to keep players wanting to play until they get their abilities back. And you just can't skip over Skyrim, by far one of the most iconic intros of any gaming franchise.
Hey, you're finally awake.
It took you right into the world and its environment, and it's probably the most famous gaming intro in the history of video games. The thing with sequels is that a good intro isn't just about pleasing the die-hard fans, it's also about welcoming newbies to the party. You want returning players to feel at home, sure, but you also want fresh blood to jump in without feeling lost. It's a delicate balance. In God of War 2, it managed to recap the first game's events without boring returning players, while also giving newcomers enough info to jump in. And now, let's finally talk about... There are so many instances where sequels surpass the originals, and at times, most people first play the sequel, fall in love with it, and go back to the original game. I'm going to start this section off with one of my favorite sequels ever made, Portal 2. This is the game where I ended up going to the original after playing the second. From the first moment of waking up in the Aperture Science Facility to the end scene, you're so immersed in the game. The world is bigger, the story is deeper, and the character developments and plot twists are insane. The humor, the puzzles, almost everything about the game was near perfection, and the ability to also play it with a friend was one of the best parts. It is by far one of the best or the best puzzle game I've ever played. When don't forget, the cake is a lie. And there's God of War. God of War is a game that pushes sequels to its absolute limits, particularly the original Greek saga and the Norse saga sequel. We went from this hack and slash about a man too angry to die to a father-son dynamic that adds emotional depth and explores narratives of redemption and parenthood. Without the context of the original saga, the Norse saga is already amazing for its refined combat and narrative. Moving on, we got Red Dead Redemption 2. Even though Red Dead Redemption 1 itself was a masterpiece, RDR 2 was a level up, and it was made by our beloved studio Rockstar. The storytelling in RDR 2 was way more expansive and an emotional roller coaster. You got attached to the character and his character development. The open world was way more detailed, more immersive, with better gameplay mechanics and one of the best graphics we have seen. Till this day, I haven't seen any game that has replicated a better horse than RDR2. And since we're talking about Rockstar, it's a good time to talk about Grand Theft Auto. I don't think I need to say much for these sequels. Each sequel one-upped the previous, and we're all waiting for 6 to drop. Every GTA game has been a benchmark in the gaming world with its graphics, storytelling, and missions. Rockstar is yet to disappoint us with a game, and I don't think that'll be happening anytime soon. Since we are talking about amazing studios, let's also talk about Valve games. Let's go over Half-Life 2. Half-Life 2 at that time was one of the biggest leap forwards in graphics, and it innovated with using physics as basis for puzzles. The AI was better, there was more gameplay variety with the vehicular segments in combat. The best part of the game was the game always flowed, no cutscenes, no notes, just keep playing the game. And then we got Team Fortress 2. They introduced a completely new art style with vibrant colors and cartoonish characters and made a whole new appeal for itself. They also introduced character classes with different abilities and playstyles, leading to one of the first widely recognized hero shooters. Which probably led to the biggest impact in FPS games we have now, as almost all top FPS games are hero shooters. It also had crazy movement mechanics like rocket jumping and sticky jumping, which at that time were popular because of games like Quake. TF2 also had way more map variety with modes, and they also added a lot of humor and personality into the character designs. I would love to talk about other games, but it's impossible for me to cover every good sequel ever, so I'm going to list them down in my honorable mentions. This is also a good time to talk about live service games like FIFA and 2K, which keep producing sequels. Although they're good, they're almost like a copy-paste game with a few new added features and slightly better graphics every year. It's like the iPhone of the gaming industry. And now, the honorable mentions of banger sequels that I will try to say in one breath to keep the video entertaining. Uncharted 2, Bioshock Infinite, Halo 2, Batman Arkham City, Street Fighter 2, Assassin's Creed 2, Resident Evil 4, The Witcher 3, Fallout New Vegas, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, Saints Row 2, Silent Hill 2, Super Mario Galaxy 2, Metal Gear Solid 2, Sons of Liberty, Dark Souls 3, Dragon Age Inquisition, The Last of Us Part 2, Xenoblade Chronicles 2. Now it's your turn. What games do you think deserve a sequel, and how would you make sure it doesn't suck? Drop your ideas in the comments. Who knows, maybe some dev will steal your brilliant plan and make it happen. Personally, I would want Rainbow Six Siege sequel to come out because of how bad the game has become now. Let me know if you enjoyed this video by liking it if you did, or disliking it if you didn't, and please let me know your thoughts on this in the comments. And if you really stayed this far, it will be amazing if you can subscribe and watch my other videos. Cheers.
Click this video. Click this video. Click this video. Click this video.